I used to deal with those questions of, hey, I don't like to use live chat, so I don't want to have it on my website. That's fantastic that you don't like it, but a growing demographic does, and that's continuing to grow. We don't answer the phone as much. We see that spam caller, or even if we see a caller ID, like we have a caller ID that pops up, they're still not going to answer it sometimes. So having the ability to communicate via text just gives us more likelihood to not only reach them, but have them interact with us.
Jon, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Glad to be here.
So you've helped found or run a multitude of businesses over the years. Can you share your professional journey with our listeners and tell us what led you to start running Intake Engine?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit of an adventure over my career. So I've done quite a few different things, but I'd say the most impactful part of my career started when I was running a location in Dubai for a steel supply chain manufacturer, mainly to the oil and gas manufacturer industry. And so I'm not an engineer, and I didn't have that kind of background. So I found out that learning processes and learning systems and figuring out how to get more out of less is something that I'm super passionate about. So it was a great experience living overseas and working with different cultures and different people. I was there for about 5 years and then decided to move back to the US with my wife and 3 kids and get back to Austin, where she's from, and take over Client Chat Live, a business that I had co-founded with a friend, and took over as CEO in 2015 and was able to grow that group. It was still a small group, but we were able to grow it past 7 figures in revenue. We were able to have a successful exit with the parent company of Alert Communications. So, we worked with law firms, and I had no intention of getting back into legal. And so that was my goal initially, but, the opportunity came to join Intake Engine, and a couple of guys that have been in legal marketing for years, and they wanted to focus on the marketing side, the campaigns and driving opportunities and traffic, as opposed to doing the intake part as well. But they had that piece of the business, and we saw a great opportunity to not only kind of combine the two, but work off of one another as if we're, sister companies, to be able to do both marketing and intake, or just intake on its own. So I'm lucky enough to be running Intake Engine and looking forward to helping more law firms and more client acquisition agencies.
What are the specific challenges that you're seeing law firms make today with their call answering and their client intake processes?
It's always been missing calls, right? Just answering the phone. And I think that's definitely graduated into they're seeing more calls or more leads or more opportunities that need to be vetted, qualified, pre-qualified. And so I think everybody just goes to, hey, I got to answer the phone. But then there's an answering service that just takes a message and dumps it onto the firm typically. And so they still have to respond and they still have to spend time. And I think as we get more efficient with the tech that we're getting in front of us now with AI, with everything that's there, I think identifying qualified potential clients and then following up enough, as much as it takes to, focus on signing them as clients. If they're going to be great potential clients, they fit that mold. It's the follow-up process. It's managing, the CRM or managing that kind of sales process. So it's way beyond just answering the phone now. It's like we've got to have 12 different communication channels coming in, but then it's the same kind of filtering or screening or follow-up process. And that's the difficult part.
So it's a great segue to talk more about your company. With those challenges that you just mentioned, how does Intake Engine address them? And more specifically, what sets you all apart from, the multitude of other options out there, the other call answering services out there?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is, and we're all consumers, right? We all have gone through that sales process one way or another. And so legal is similar, but has some differences with the empathy, the difficult situations most people are facing when they do reach out. They're not used to reaching out to a law firm. It's not something they've probably done before. So it's intimidating. But as a consumer, as somebody, I would like to go as far along the process as I can on my own. And then, if qualified, or if I meet those initial requirements, then use my time or take my time to get more information. That's what's a little bit different with Intake Engine is we provide not only the human agents that are calling and following up or answering the inbound calls, but we provide the potential clients with a link to a form essentially, and we call it the client journey. And they go through the same process that our agents will go through. So I would say about a quarter of the signed retainers we get do that self-service portal initially, and they go through, for some, we can go all the way through from qualified to signed, do the e-signing, and then our team is going to follow up to do kind of an exit interview, if you will, to make sure they're real, verify information before transferring it to the firm. So start to finish, we're not just a answering service and we're going to take a message. We're able to do that 24/7, but we're going to keep that potential client in our ecosystem, and we're going to continue to follow up with them for up to 90 days. So again, very different. We do email, text, phone, all that kind of outreach and follow up. But we're more of a sales driven intake type team as opposed to customer service and answering service.
Can you clarify how you all describe what a qualified lead is? And then not only that, but how do you ensure that that definition corresponds with your customer's definition? Because I know every firm is different. Every firm considers a qualified lead to be a slightly different thing based on certain criteria, right? Like a personal injury law firm in Austin, Texas might have a very different definition of what a qualified lead is, if they're based in some other city or state, right? Like every firm has a slightly nuanced definition of what a qualified lead is. To clarify the question, what is a qualified lead and how do you help bridge that gap between what you constitute as a qualified lead and what your clients do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you probably know best, right? It's like you said, they could be next door to one another. Two PI firms one will take a case and the other will laugh and DQ it. Like that's not for us. So what we do is, Intake Engine was born out of that mass torts world. As far as you've got pretty black and white, diagnosed before X, diagnosed with some of that yes, no kind of Boolean, if you will, technology or logic. So we started with that. And as we get more into PI and personal injury, we know, okay, you've got a car accident. Well, were they at fault? Were they injured? Medical treatment? Is there a way to classify the level of injuries? Is it just soft tissue or is it more severe, catastrophic, things like that? So we're able to build in that kind of logic and questionnaire into each customer or client to where we're able to go and do a lot of if-then that before, it used to just be a big Word doc in a lot of answering services. And it was up to the individual agent to make that decision, essentially, or just take a message and leave it with the firm. So we work with our clients before we get going. We verify not only the script, but the logic. And then as we go along, we're kind of changing or updating or refining what that looks like. And so we're able to say, hey, if it meets this criteria, go ahead and sign it. If it meets X criteria, send it to the firm to review. And if it doesn't, then it's a DQ and we reject it from there. So it's very custom and we're trying to maintain the technology to be very flexible, but not to where we're saying, hey, this is going to take us a week and we need to charge setup fees. It's very flexible. And that's just the way we have to have it. That's what the industry needs and wants.
Right. You're not selling something cookie cutter. It has to be customized to the customer's preferences. And then on that same note, how does it work then with your customer CRMs? Are you able to, um, connect to their CRMs? Or in some cases, do you have to just send them the lead via email? How does that integration work?
Yeah, so we started out with a basic integration with Box. I've always been a Dropbox person, but Box is actually pretty cool. And so, security wise, we give access to who needs access to view the retainers and view the intakes in Box. But we've progressed past that to where we are able to send that new lead, that intake data into Lead Docket. We utilize Zapier like a lot of folks do, so that middleman basically helps us connect with quite a few things. But we just had a campaign with a firm that uses Lead Docket and had we expected about 20 retainers, and we ended up getting hundreds for various reasons. Community, they shared our phone number, they shared a lot of different things, which is pretty cool, but they were overwhelmed with the data entry. And so we were able to hook up a webhook pretty quickly into their Lead Docket instance. So it populated the new lead, all the data. It's pretty flexible. So we're able to, again, manipulate the software, update the tech to where it's not legacy and we're kind of at its mercy.
Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of offering multiple communication methods, like specifically, calls, SMS, email, and live chat for client intake?
Yeah, and obviously coming from the live chat world previously, I used to deal with those questions of, hey, I don't like to use live chat, so I don't want to have it on my website. That's fantastic that you don't like it, but a growing demographic does, and that's continuing to grow. We know we don't answer the phone as much. We see that spam caller, or even if we see a caller ID, like we have a caller ID that pops up, they're still not going to answer it sometimes. So having the ability to communicate via text, email, or phone just gives us more likelihood to not only reach them, but have them interact with us. So we launched live chat maybe a month or two ago. And it's a little bit different from tell me about your situation. Okay, let me pass this along to the firm. It's much more of a using that same logic that our agents would to gather the right information and then see if they're qualified. And the biggest difference in that is if they are not qualified, it does not continue the process. It lets them know professionally, whatever that customized message is, can be a video. Thank you for contacting us. We do get their information so that, you're a marketer, right? You want to have, doesn't matter they didn't qualify this time. They're in the community, they're in the neighborhood, they're in the city, whatever that is. You want their information to continue to market to them. But if they are qualified, then it passes along to our agents seamlessly, and then we jump on that. So, I think just being everywhere, you've got Google local services ads, you've got Facebook, you've got all these different channels, if you will, and you just got to be available for almost all of them. So you can find people where they are.
Agreed. And I think the common misconception with live chat specifically is I see people have these like two very different philosophies when it comes to live chat. And I candidly think they're both wrong, where it's like, okay, we want to make the live chat form as simple as possible so that like they submit the lead and then my intake team can speak with them. And then I see the opposite of that, which is live chat needs to replace the job of an intake agent. And I need to ask every conceivable question about their case. And, obviously that's going to result in lower leads overall. I agree with you that it's more of a mechanism to immediately qualify the lead and determine, is it even worthy of your intake team's time? Right. So it's like asking, in a lot of cases, depending on the type of case you're going for, it could be as many as like 3 or 4 questions, right? Like personal injury, for example, date of injury, where did the injury occur? Do you already have an attorney? Like those would be some great starting points, right? If they're already working with an attorney, you probably don't want to touch that case with a 10-foot pole. If the injury happened 20 years ago, that's beyond the statute of limitations. Like there's all these quick, immediate data points that you can look at to pretty much immediately deduce whether or not this is someone that you're going to be able to help, right? So why not incorporate that into not only your live chat, but I don't know how you all structure the calls. Are you structuring the intake calls in a similar fashion where, qualifying questions are front loaded, and then, once they answer those questions a certain way, it then dictates the remainder of the conversation, like what questions are asked, or if you kindly, politely, tell them, unfortunately, we can't help you. How does that work in regards to the actual phone call?
With our system, it handles the chat and the phone call in a very similar way. So it's the same setup. So as far as how we organize the flow, a lot of times when the call's coming in, we're able to gather metadata and some information about the caller, their phone number, all that good stuff. So we don't have to get as much of that front loaded, but we do the initial kind of screening, if you will. And so we work in tandem with the marketers. If they've got a web form, we want some of our questions to match that as much as possible. And so when it comes to us, some of it's already mapped in and some of it's already updated. And so it's starting off where they left off. So it's not, hey, let's fill out a form. And then they've got somebody calling and saying, okay, can I get your name, email, phone number, and tell me about your situation? That's so frustrating. It's all seamless. And so if we already have the answer from the chat or from a form, it's already pre-filled. And so, we're looking at it from that standpoint to try to make it a seamless flow. And just like you said, as far as how we prioritize the calls, we are no different than any other intake team or sales team. We're going to prioritize the qualified, the more likely to sign, the higher lead score, if you will. And so that's what we're utilizing our technology to do is as we get more and more data and information, of course, we'll be able to see, okay, this one's got a 90, this one's a 50, this one's getting tasked first. So, the 90 is. So, utilizing that kind of system is something we see not only ourselves doing, but firms and other businesses like them.
You mentioned just now that you are commonly working in tandem with marketing teams. What can you talk specifically about what that looks like? Because I see this as a huge opportunity for a lot of law firms in that marketing and intake need to be consistently communicating and providing feedback loops. Because if you don't, marketing can kind of go crazy with the lead generation, and none of that really sticks to the intake team's bones, the business's bones, because they're just not getting any feedback on what is a qualified lead, what things should you be looking for and targeting, so on and so forth. So what does working as an intake arm, what does that look like in terms of working with a marketing team?
Yeah, so I think the beauty of Intake Engine was that it was essentially born from marketers. And so, we've always said at Client Chat Live, it was, built for lawyers by lawyers. My co-founder is a PI attorney, and that led a lot of discussions. But, we're marketers, but also, sales teams and intake teams. But what we try to do is say, okay, what sources do you have coming in? We can isolate the source so that when it comes in, everybody's got the call rail set up, all that, they can utilize that. But if it's coming from Facebook, from Google Ads, we can separate those so that when we give that feedback to the marketing agency or the firm, hey, you're getting, 50 leads, 15 came from phone, 20 came from Facebook, and here's the conversion rate for each source. So I think in the past, when I've talked to different marketing agencies, it was, hey, can you guys do this with the URL we're passing, or can you give us the Google Click ID? And a lot of times it was met with, not from us, but it was met with, I don't think so. Or, we have different systems, or you've got the Scorpion world where it's like, no, we're not sharing anything. It's all in our system. So I think just being open and saying, hey, our goal is to help you guys look good. It doesn't matter. We're not sharing anything super proprietary. We're just feeding back and relaying information. And so I think to me, that's kind of the key is we understand their pain points and the firm's pain points. and we're trying to marry the two in the service levels we provide.
The thing that I've found, to not to oversimplify it, but on the marketing end, they ultimately need to be graded on qualified leads, like the number of qualified leads. Forget total leads, right? At the end of the day, who cares if you drove 1,000 leads? If none of them are qualified, you did nothing for the firm. And then with intake, it's the conversion rate on the qualified leads, right? So it's qualified conversion rate, because they can't be held accountable to converting something that, isn't a case, that doesn't have any viability to it. So it's like, if any of our listeners are kind of wondering, like, how do you manage both the marketing end and the intake end, I would say start with measurement, start with defining some KPIs. And again, not to oversimplify, marketing, you can always be looking at qualified leads for them. And then for intake, you're looking at qualified conversion rate. I see a lot of firms automatically just go to cases for either department, right? Like, oh, marketing drove this many cases, intake drove this many cases. And it's like, that's really the ultimate lag KPI. That's like the very end result. If you think about this in terms of like an assembly line, marketing is, teeing it up, and then intake is, hitting the ball from there, right? They're the ones to bring that case in. So again, qualified lead on the marketing side, qualified conversion rate on the intake side.
That's funny you use the analogy of hitting the ball, but we call it batting average essentially. And it's, you can do, if you have a lot of volume, you can do lead versus sign, but like, I agree with you. It's to try to make it a level playing field. Another little analogy there, but playing field for the intake people and teams, you want to say, hey, if it's qualified, are you closing it? Are you converting it? And so everybody's on the same team, no matter what shift they're working or whatnot. So they may have more, more at bats or more attempts during the heavier hours than an agent maybe working a weekend or something like that. But ultimately, you want to look at, hey, this person and this person are handling, out of 20 qualified leads, this one closed 50%, this one closed 30%. Let's dig in a little bit and see why. Our target is X, whatever that is. And so that's one metric. And then the next one we look at is, if we've sent a retainer, an e-sign, how many of those are closing? So it's like two levels, if you will, because we want to make sure if they've gotten to that point where they have a retainer in hand, what are we doing there to help convert and get them signed up as well?
Right. The other thing too is, if going back to what I was saying about qualified lead for marketing and qualified conversion rate for intake, if you're experiencing a downturn in cases in a given month, quarter, year, it's really helpful to have those metrics separated by department so that you can assign some level of accountability. Marketing could be doing its job. You could be driving a healthy number of qualified leads, but your intake team could be dragging behind and causing the overall case number to be lower. And then vice versa. Your intake team could be crushing it, but or marketing is not putting enough meat on the table, right? So it's important to understand that assembly line so that you can diagnose the problem and then prescribe the appropriate solution, right? Because again, I see too often firms are just looking at the end number. They're looking at, oh yeah, cases. Our cases are down. Why are our cases down? And it's really hard to be able to say why or why not if they aren't tracking qualified leads, if they're not tracking qualified conversion rate, right? And even taking it a step further, they're not tracking those metrics by marketing channel. They're not tracking those metrics by agent, right? So there is such I think it's hard for firms that don't have this tracking set up currently to get over that initial mountain of like, it's such a huge undertaking, right? Like, you have to set up these systems. You need to make sure your data entry is like spot on. You need to really put people in charge of this and hold them accountable to it. And even then, you don't start to see the effects of that effort for maybe 6, 12, 18 months, right? Because starting off, you're going to have barely any data to make meaningful changes with. But as that system starts to collect more and more data, you can really start to move these puzzle pieces around in such a way that yields more and more cases. So um, I wanted to talk a little bit. This is kind of a segue. Um, what are the steps involved in setting up your services for a law firm, and how quickly can a firm expect to be operational?
Yeah, I think that's what again makes us unique in this kind of intake world, the call center world. Um, we're able to not just take on, hey, we're going to switch all of our phone calls to you and everything like that. We're able to do that, but typically we're more of an extension of an intake team, or we're an add-on, or we're after hours, something along those lines. And it's very much campaign driven, if you will. So it's specific case types, and we'll help with filtering and things along those lines. But um, we don't have multiple hours of onboarding calls and 7 people sitting in a room on a Zoom call or whatever. It's simple questionnaire. We try to take as much on ourselves as possible, and I had the same kind of mentality or strategy at Client Chat Live. Was we don't want them to do the script. We want to be able to utilize, again, we utilize AI for scrubbing a website, getting practice areas, getting more knowledge about the firm, about the attorneys. And we put that into our system and scripts, if you will. And so we try to do as much of that heavy lifting up front. And so it's 10 minutes of a questionnaire. Who do you want to be notified? Who do you want to be notified of a new signed retainer? Things along those lines. And then we'll come back a couple days later with a script and get that confirmed and get that going and do some tests. So, right now we're telling people about 7 days. So about 5 business days set up. We're able to do faster, but, in case there's integrations and stuff like that, we try to do about 7 to 10 days.
Awesome. Can you talk to me a little bit about your agents? How do you ensure that your call center agents provide a personalized service and empathetic support to the clients?
Yeah, they're all U.S. based agents. We are spread around, and we're heavily remote, mostly remote, but we have the systems and the technology in place for not only providing their ability to interact and communicate, but for us to identify when they need help. We utilize AI for taking a call recording and transcribing and redacting. And then we have an AI agent that scores those calls. So we're able to look at, hey, these are lower calls or lower scored calls, quickly provide that feedback, as opposed to somebody listening to calls for hours and hours and then updating a spreadsheet and then 2 weeks later having that conversation with the agent. So we're trying to provide as much real-time feedback, if you will, or quick feedback. And because we're not working in other industries, or at least focusing on other industries, we're able to train our agents and say, hey, this is a personal injury matter. This is what's happening in this situation. I also inherited a good team of folks that have done this for a while. And, again, on the mass tort side, but they're also handling sexual abuse cases, which is probably the furthest on the spectrum of difficulty to handle, most empathetic. And so if you're calling a call center that handles 20 different industries, you're not going to get that kind of, kid gloves handling, if you will. And so when we look to hire, not only train, but hire folks, it's, again, they have to have some sales experience, because that, I know the cliche salesperson talks a lot, but I think the good ones listen really well. And so they have that kind of customer service capability built in, but then here's the solution right after. And so it's that empathetic listening to gather the pain points, to gather the information, and then communicate it back to the individual calling. So, we do try to find folks that have legal experience as well, and have been successful with that too.
Yeah, I was going to say, having the knowledge of the practice areas that they're helping generate cases for, that seems like a requirement, because yeah, you can be a great salesperson, you can be super empathetic and, establish rapport, but there are going to be instances where you get some objections or you have some questions about, certain things. And if you don't know about, personal injury law, if you don't know about, a certain mass tort or something like that, um, it's going to come across on that call, and you're not going to instill much confidence in that person. So obviously you're not, as an intake person, supposed to replace an attorney, and you shouldn't be giving out legal advice or anything like that, but you should still know enough about the thing that you're, selling, so that you can, handle those types of objections. So I think that's awesome that you hire US law firm experience, and they're getting focused training on the practice areas that they're helping with. You mentioned AI, specifically using an AI agent to do lead scoring. I wanted to ask, how else are you using AI in your services, and how does it enhance the client experience?
Yeah, I think first off, we use AI to create those scripts as well. And so we have some custom GPTs that we've kind of loaded with the ideal scripts and our formats and things like that. And so we can easily put in a website and get a full script back. And then it's just for us to tweak in that regard. We're using it a little bit more for reporting as well, and analysis. And so we've got all this data, and we want to be able to look at, okay, how did this campaign perform to this one? Can you see any differences? Can you see anything that might stick out? So kind of using that as that enhancer in terms of analysis for ourselves. We will start to look at that. The chat is not AI right now, but pretty soon it's going to be able to provide more than just the logic flow. It should be able to provide a little bit more feedback, again, without giving legal advice. And that's, you mentioned it, it's probably the first and foremost, most important thing that a lot of folks that don't handle just legal on the tech side may not fully appreciate. But we will be utilizing some AI in that regard. And then again, in the next, I would say 6 months or less, should have some kind of a voice agent as well, not to do the outbound calls. That's all human, or, things like that, but to be able to answer 24/7 and ask the questions that they need to ask to get pre-qualified, instead of relying on a human agent to do that, and they miss a call or they miss the outbound while they're on that call. And so it's, kind of trying to do more with less, trying to do a better job of qualifying, screening, and ultimately it helps us, but it helps the caller or the potential client even more, in my opinion. They're getting some kind of a resolution, whether that's we can't help or we can, and here's the next steps. And whether that be getting the retainer or getting them sent over to the firm. So quickly giving them some kind of a resolution might not be the right word, but not stringing them along.
So that's the present day application of AI and tech. How do you foresee the integration of technology, AI, in the future of legal intake services?
Yeah, I think it's amazing how fast it's moving, to be honest. And I know everybody says that, but it's crazy. I feel like I love it. I'm like in it a little bit too much sometimes, in that rabbit hole. But yeah, I think it's going to be able to handle a lot more processes, and during calls be able to provide feedback immediately to, and I know there's stuff out there like Gong and all that, but mainly for SDRs and outbound sales. But it's not specific to the firm we're handling, right? They have a question about a firm. If it's not in our script or available, it should have that in a knowledge base somewhere that can dig and return it real fast, some kind of a response. So if we can give our agents more tools to focus on the caller, focus on the empathy, focus on what it is they're calling about, as opposed to like, hang on while I type this in kind of a scenario. I could see that almost going away too, of typing in an email address. If the agent's on the phone, they can see it typed, with our system and confirm it, that type of thing, to where it's quicker, faster, more efficient.
One thing I think will be completely gone in a year or two, interactive voice responses on calls. Like when you call into a company and it's like press 1 for this, press 2 for that. Like that's to me is something that'll be easily replaced by an AI agent. It'll sound like a person, and they'll just ask you the question like, do you want to speak with an attorney? Are you a new client? And then they'll route the call that way. That to me seems like very close around the corner.
It's very close. It's essentially here, right? I mean, it's the hard part is building that for like the call centers or these, groups like ours. The hard part is building it to where you have the flexibility to do it for 100 firms and deliver the customized capability, but also, just the blocking and tackling that's needed. So, if you go to a lot of these different tech providers, they're going to say, yeah, it's easy to do this and this. And it's like, well, that's if you're one business. But I need to be able to answer a phone call and have it produce, consistently, effectively. So there's no crossing of any kind of, company to company. Look into our database, make sure they're a previous caller or new caller, create the log, do all that stuff, and then populate the right questions based on that specific firm and that specific case type. And it's all doable and possible. It's just a matter of kind of connecting all those dots and widgets.
And making sure that you have some type of compliance process, QA process, because this stuff, if it's very easy to break, it seems like. So I wanted to ask how, like, first off, do you record all your calls?
Yep, they're recorded in our system.
So could you discuss for our listeners, could you discuss the importance of having calls recorded and maintaining accuracy and compliance during the intake process?
Yeah, it's the obvious part is the QA, being able to go back and listen to it. But also we've had situations where someone says, well, I didn't say X or Y. And it's a little bit of a CYA, right? It's, well, we did sign this person up. They claimed they did not have an attorney. They claimed this, they claimed that. We're at the mercy of what they're saying in that regard. So there's definitely a lot of the capability of going back and looking at what was actually said, in addition to the obvious training and quality for our agents. I think the key now with, the one-to-one consent essentially in place, and who knows what changes we'll see soon, but if you don't have those recordings in your tech system, they call you, you need to say, can I call you back on this number? Am I authorized essentially? If you don't ask that and they hang up pretty quickly, technically you're not supposed to call them back. That's against the law, if you will. And I'm sure I'm going to get fact checked on that one. I don't know if it's against the law, but yeah, it's that one-to-one consent is a huge thing, to where a marketer used to be able to have someone sign up on a lead form, and then it's like, oh, this firm can't handle it. Let me pass it along to my network of firms and spray that person's info. That violates that new one-to-one consent.
I would imagine the law varies by state. Again, don't quote me on that. But that, for any lawyer listening, make sure to fact check Jon and I here for accuracy. But
the one-to-one consent is federal. So
that is federal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But each state does have its own like recording. You have to say, I'm going to record you, or that you're on a recorded line, whether that's through the automated before it connects, or whether that's the agent saying it first and foremost.
Jon, this has been great. I wanted to ask you one last question. If you could give a law firm one piece of general advice regarding their intake, what would it be?
Identify the best potential clients. And it doesn't have to be one, right? Multiple personas. What does that look like? If you're PI, is it geographic? And then it's, case specific or situation specific, injured, what type of injuries, what are you willing to accept, and what are you looking for? And this is where the talking to marketing helps out so much, to where if marketing is generating activity and intake is doing the work and they're not getting clients and there's no feedback loop, they don't know to change ads or change channels, what that looks like. And so if you know who it is you're going after and targeting, that's a huge thing for drafting and kind of crafting that intake script and criteria. So I think that's first and foremost, is know what types of cases you're going for. And they can't all be, FedEx truck death cases, but that would be nice.
Jon, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How can our listeners learn more about Intake Engine?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. My kids make fun of me a lot because that's pretty much the only social that I'm on, but it is what it is. I'm older, all good. But LinkedIn, but intakeengine.com. Stop by, check out the chat, mess with it, play with it if you want. But if you'd like, fill out a form. Would love to have a call, even if it's just to talk about your intake process right now and how it can improve. And if we're not able to help, all good. Just love to talk intake.
Great. Thank you again, Jon. And thanks everyone for tuning into this episode of the Pareto Legal Podcast. We'll see you next time for another episode.